One of the most important themes that we find in tarot that comes up very regularly from the earliest decks and their models even before them to modern decks we have today. The theme of cycles, repetition, and understanding how energy moves through our lives in consistent patterns, but at different scales, tends to repeat over and over again in the symbols and imagery that we find in decks. Some modern decks are very intentionally avoiding that conversation, but it is a very old one that draws on themes from ancient philosophy, spirituality, and wisdom, since we have any information about how humans were talking about that. The really big picture of this concept of cycles goes back to the idea that there is a limited amount of stuff in our reality. So anything that exists in its current form likely has come together from parts that are in a cycle, that move from form to form in order to allow for flexibility and growth and transformation. There is all this material and energy that is becoming new forms over time, and it's all part of a cycle. And many of our current ecological sciences reflect this way of thinking. Our sense of the way that physics and thermodynamics work also reflect the idea that there's a limited amount of energy and matter in the universe, and they are constantly transforming from one to the other in order to keep stuff in motion. And ecologically, we've got mineral cycles, the water cycle, various energy cycles that affect the weather, the overall climate, the way that ecosystems operate, and what kind of transmissions happen on their borders. The concept of cycles is very important to us in our understanding of reality. Now, in a spiritual sense, there has always been a question of, well, if there is this economy, then probably there isn't an infinite amount of spiritual energy any more than there is an infinite amount of, say, heat energy or light energy. Therefore, whatever it is that makes us move around, that makes us alive, also is probably in some kind of a cycle. So that's where you get this concept of reincarnation, at least on the Western side of things. It came from different thought patterns in different places. But the arguments for the immortality of the soul often go back to this question of, well, there can't be just infinite souls being produced and spewed out into reality. What would happen to all of them? What would happen to all of that energy if it just kept producing and producing and producing? Eventually, reality would be too full of souls. Just like any system in which one element overrides and crowds out all the other elements. The system can't function that way. So people were thinking of spiritual systems in just the same context. Surely, the souls that make us what we are have to be in part of a cycle. So the idea to make sense of that was reincarnation, that the souls are actually gaining experience and learning and going through something that transforms them in just the same way that the common elements that make up the physical world are going through different transitions, becoming forms, and then dissolving to then become other forms. Whether or not you believe in reincarnation, considering this concept of cycles through time is very helpful in strengthening your tarot practice. Because psychologically, in our own lives, just in our little lifespans, we go through a lot of different psychological cycles. as we move into new situations, new periods of our lives, new senses of, well, now I'm this age, what does this mean for me? As we tackle challenges, we tend to go through the same psychological cycles. We find ourselves thinking about things, having the same feelings as we did when we were at similar points in other cycles in our past. Often when we meet new people, we get into emotional entanglements, we find ourselves referring to the same narratives that we engaged in the first time that we felt those feelings and found ourselves in these same emotional entanglements. In the world of psychology, it's generally agreed that having a good understanding of your cycles, being able to see them happening and identify where you are in your own rotation of feelings, of reality, of your personal functions, is a healthy thing because it helps you not react in extreme ways when there are moments in your cycle that would encourage you to do so. So that you know that that's coming, or that you're likely to do that when you feel a certain way, when certain things are going on around you, and you can respond with self-control, or by putting yourself in a position where indulging in those urges is positive or useful, or at least neutral, and you can enjoy it as much as you can. So a big part of my tarot practice then, since I see this theme not just in the cards and their symbols, in ancient wisdom, in modern psychology, and then also this larger question of, well, is this an absolute spiritual principle that we need to be thinking about? Are we also going through cycles of our soul and trying to figure out what we can learn from this existence that our soul particularly needs due to the circumstances and attractions that have come into our lives and formed the thematic possibilities that we get to react to and make decisions about? So if we've got these different layers of cycles going on, and the cards are already designed to speak to these cycles, then when I'm doing a reading, it's important for me to be able to identify, well, if here's your question or concern, or even if you're just looking for general information, I want to be able to tell every client something about the cycles in their life and where they're at, and the best way to approach those cycles in order to get through them successfully and feel satisfied with your next steps. To have a clear idea of where you've been, why you are where you are, and what to do that will make the most natural, comfortable move forward, because the theme of the cycle is at least consistent. And a deep understanding of tarot gives you a much clearer concept of what all the positions in the various types of cycles are going to feel like, and easy ways to respond to them and work with them. So for the next little bit, I'm going to show you cards from the old Madinay printing of the Marseille deck that give us an idea of how people who saw these cards may have thought about cycles in life based on the images and ideas in them. So we'll start with card number 1, the Juggler. Already, there is a very basic and visceral concept of a cycle here, because a juggler juggles in a circle. Some of the objects being juggled are just kind of free arcing from one hand to the other. Others are being passed from one hand to the other. And there is a sense of the hands having to maneuver to keep this going on. The juggler's whole body has to be in sync in order to keep things moving. And the skill of the juggler is determined by the weight, size, and number of things that they are juggling. So the juggler as an example or symbol of one who moves cycles would have been at least on the edge of the thoughts of a lot of people who saw this card. There is also the context of where you might see a juggler. At a festival, when they pass through town. It could just be somebody who lives in your town who will come out and juggle on certain occasions. So, in the sense of time, in the sense of events that happen in a township, in a locality, the juggler is a part of the social cycles and economic cycles of that world. They come out when something interesting is going on, when a lot of people are going to be in the marketplace, when folks are generally out and interacting. And then the juggler's not there on other days that would probably be perceived more as normal days. So already with the first card in the trumps, or at least card number 1, depends on where you'd like to put the Fool, there is this idea that this person is part of many types of cycles, both in time and in activity. Another pretty obvious illustration of cycles in life would be the Pope card. The idea of the ecclesiastical world and all of the characters that maintained it, the priests, the deacons, church administrators, cardinals, all the way up to the Pope. They presented a cycle of time, and really even the calendar itself, that maintained the temporal cycles of reality based on the seasons. So there's actually some tension in this card, asking a person, well, do you follow time as the church lays it out, or are you more of the pagan inclination, following time based purely on the seasons, what is going on in the environment, what the plants are up to, what the animals are up to? How do you look at the larger cycles of festival, of what to call various periods of time, and how you are going to interact with the cycles in the natural world? Do you believe that this organization is in fact reinforcing the cycles that have been arranged by divine providence? Or I guess really providence would come a little bit later outside of the scope of the Pope. And even that would raise another question about your position. So to see this card would have people thinking about the theory behind the cycles that they follow. It's a much more heady card than what they would be getting out of thinking about cycles in the case of the juggler or magician. The Lover is another great example because we have our young man here in the center, a young woman on one side, and a more mature woman on the other side. And then Cupid at the top. Cupid seems to be blissfully outside of the concerns of the cycles affecting these people. He's just up there to keep the energy moving and make sure that romance and emotional action happens. But for these folks, there is the sense that this woman understands the perspective of this woman very well, whereas the younger woman probably doesn't understand the full perspective of the older woman, and the young man here is in the middle of the cycle. I like to ask myself if these women are perhaps his sisters. Is one a potential lover, the other a mother, a friend, and someone who may be offering him a job? There are a lot of possibilities for the types of relationships being built here. But the sense that it is the women who are in a position to say, I have grown from where you were, and I will eventually be in your position, that reminds us that in cycles and in our romantic or in our emotional lives, in our romantic commitments, we have to deal with the cycles of our own age, our position in society, and how that has other people relating to us and considering our role in the greater cycle of life. And what that's going to mean as far as the way that they respond to and interact with us. So we have social cycles, in addition to those that are more purely just about times and seasons. The Wheel of Fortune is an important model of this cyclical way of thinking, and was a very prominent image in the medieval and Renaissance world. You saw these wheels of fortune in lots of different manuscripts, and even in very intricate statues and reliefs showing characters that are somewhere on the position of a wheel. Generally, the top is considered the best spot, the bottom is considered the worst spot. But the wheel keeps moving. As this is the 10, following cards 1 through 9, that all pretty much depict a character who is in a particular role, we can look at the Wheel of Fortune as the expression in the deck that our roles change. That based on our circumstances, what we have done, we're going to go from one role to another. And the observing creature up here reminds us that our roles transform based on who is interacting with us. Every person sees every other person's role in a different context depending on their role. So our decisions about how to interact with other people's roles and which roles we would like to take does depend on our ability and position as a wise observer. Are we looking at things in ways that respect and make sense of the roles around us and the role that other people are seeing us in? Or are we trying to go against the flow of the wheel, likely in the long run getting crushed underneath it? So we move from cycles that are fairly external to us to a cycle that really puts us in question of our identity. Even if we stay in the same role, there are questions about how exactly we enact that role and how it shifts over time as we gain experience and the roles around us may be changing. Of the cards in the Marseille deck, the 13 is another one that is deeply embedded in the concept of cycles. Now, it is actually kind of difficult for me to think of this character as the character of death that was depicted in medieval times or in Renaissance times. Mainly because he doesn't exactly look the part. He's not wearing the long robe and cape that death typically is, and usually death is standing pretty upright, is often gesturing towards somebody else. He's there to make a call. Whereas this character is reaping, is harvesting, definitely is related to the effect that death has in that things grow to maturity and then they are separated from the conditions in which they grew for another use. So the cycle of mortality definitely comes up, but there's also the cycle of agriculture, because this character is a reaper, and a lot of the folks who would see this card would be thinking about work in the fields, which they were either doing or was going on around them on a pretty regular basis, unless they lived deep in a city and never got out to the fields. People would be thinking about the back-breaking work of doing the same things in the fields every year and just working through the seasons, time after time. There's an element in this card of the cycle wearing you out. That if all that you're thinking about is this cycle and then the next cycle and how to do it like we did it back in the best cycle, but it's probably not going to be the best cycle again, so we just got to keep working harder and harder and harder, you're going to waste away. And you're just going to become this frame on which your agricultural activity is hung for all of your existence. And that will take away the vitality and fluid nature that life appreciates having. Three of the cards that are most clearly pointing toward cycles are those of the celestial figures in the deck. The star, in which water is added back to water, water that may have been used for cleaning or some other practical use, is now returned to the bigger cycle of streams, rivers, underwater caverns. And this in a card with the stars above it, which were mathematically calculated in their cycles so that people could predict where they were going to be and what those cycles looked like. The stars were a powerful symbol of our cyclical existence. So we have the microcosm of this cycle of water moving and this element that transfers things from one place to another, as well as a reference to the cycle of life in this pregnant woman, and then this greater cycle of all the energies in our reality that are cycling around us and affecting our existence, but that we really can't control. We're affected by them, we cannot control them. The moon, reminding us of monthly cycles, as well as the cycles of the tides, of our emotions, of dream and nightmare, of waking and sleeping life. These cycles also have an interplay that can have broader effects that may be difficult to predict when we are under the effect of each position in that cycle. So it is a cycle that affects us, but in ways that we may not be sure of even as they're happening. Especially because if we think about the fact that we can't always remember our dreams, they still have an effect on us, regardless of whether it's conscious or not. And the sun puts us in mind of the daily cycle, that the sun rises again every day. This brings us opportunities for what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, how we will interact, the kind of work that each day brings to us. And the final card I'll discuss in this video is Judgment. Because again, we have this sense that something is being called forth, and the reference to familial characters, whether these are children of this person, or one of them is, or this person is a fresh soul that these folks have brought into the world. There is a question of how our actions, activities, our circumstances and fate have led us to be considered by the spiritual forces around us, and where in the cycle we will go next. Do we need to be improved again? Do we get to move on to a different station in the cycle of souls? Or in this case, we can look at it from a more psychological standpoint and say, what is the context in which we judge ourselves to move on to the next cycle? If we feel bad about something we've done in circumstances that are coming to a head or ending, or we feel real good about something we've done in a process that we're a part of, how do we make good judgment about that? Did those good or bad feelings come directly from our own activity? Did we inherit them from other people who set up a structure that we were able to work with? Or did it just seem like we were in the right place at the right time? We heard the call, we responded, we got ourselves there, and we made sure that in respect for that call and the honor that it brings to us, that we would operate in a way that we would be judged well, to the greatest of our ability. And there are also cycles within our own internal process of judgment itself. Often we feel like we've done a great job, months or years later, to find out that there was a lot that we weren't aware of, a lot we didn't see, that we may not have been happy about had we been aware of it at that time, or even in reflection we think, oh no, I can't believe I was a part of that. And so as information and time exposes more details of our life to us, we're always returning to this sense of judgment. Did I do it right? Could I do it better? Was there anything I could have done about this or that? So I hope that this has made it very clear to you that the theme of cycles is pretty strong, especially in older tarot decks, but it has been inherited by the entire printing tradition. You'll almost always find some hint or inkling of this concept of cyclical thought and behavior and emotional life in tarot decks. So thank you very much for listening. If you are looking for someone to have a regular tarot interchange with, please check out my Patreon. You'll have an opportunity to sign up for my reading subscription service. Please check out my other videos. I am always looking for feedback, comments, conversation about what I'm saying on here, whether it helps you, whether you have other viewpoints. I am fascinated to know what kind of thoughts it spurs for you. So thank you again for listening, and have a fabulous day. Take care.